You're listening to Civic Media. You can tune into any of our live shows on any radio station across the state with the Civic Media app. Find us in your phone's app store and listen anytime, anywhere.
Live across Wisconsin on Civic Media, you're listening to Mornings with Pat Kreitlow, powered by Up North News. Now, from our Lake Wissota studio, here is the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Kreitlow.
Hey, good morning. It is 7:06. Nice to have you back here up north on a Wednesday morning. It's the first day of October 2025. Parker Olson producing things down in Madison at Studio A2 at Civic Media headquarters at the top of State Street, just one block away from the state capitol. Coming up, we'll meet Ellie Bourdo, our new newsletter editor at Up North News, coming up in just a bit. And then there's some big news coming up on this program 90 minutes from now. So you're going to want to stick around till 8:35, or if you have to step away, come on back, or sign up and get this show as a podcast through Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And it's all about the 7th Congressional District up north. The 7th Congressional District takes up like at least the northern third of the state. Tom Tiffany has represented it for the past couple of years. He's now running for governor. So it is an open seat, and we'll be talking with somebody who's going to shed some light on who the next congressional representative could be up north in the 7th District in just a little bit. Brittany Merlot is off, which is a shame because we would finally get to introduce Merlot to Bourdo. That, of course, would be Ellie Bourdo, the new newsletter editor here at Up North News. Ellie, good morning. How are you?
Yes, good morning. I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. It's so nice to have you here. We want to learn more about you and more about the newsletter. So having got that hello in there, just stand by for a sec because I realized I got to pass on the keyword for the Go for the Green and Gold text to win contest, where you could be winning cash and jewelry as part of a daily prize. And then every entry has you ready to go for the grand prize, which is 2 club level indoor seats to see Green Bay versus Minnesota playing a little football game on November 23rd in Green Bay, plus a gas card to get you to the game. Total value of the prize package, more than $1,500. So get on that Civic Media app and get set to text us this keyword before 8 a.m. And then there will be other words throughout the course of the day, other chances to enter, starting with Matt and Air on Air during the 9 a.m. hour. But for the 7 a.m. hour, the text to win keyword is cheer. That's C-H-E-E-R. Cheer, C-H-E-E-R. Text that before 8 o'clock for your chance to win the daily prize and be in the running for that grand prize as well. Cheer before the end of the hour, C-H-E-E-R. All right, we've got the housekeeping out of the way. So in talking with Ellie about the newsletter, I guess we'll first start with a little bit about yourself. Coming first off from, you're an Oconomowoc girl, first and foremost.
Yes, I am. I'm born and raised in Oconomowoc. I've lived in Wisconsin my whole life, which I love. I love Wisconsin, so I'm not complaining about that. I went to UW-Madison. I graduated there in 2024 with degrees in journalism and Spanish. While I was at UW-Madison, I was a writer and editor for the Daily Cardinal there, which is the independent student newspaper on campus. And now I'm here. So all good things.
Yeah, all good things. Absolutely. So with the Daily Cardinal, did you have like a particular beat or interest?
Yeah, so I kind of did a little bit of everything. I started out my sophomore year and I went into it completely blind. I had no idea what it meant to be a journalist. I did not know how to write a story. And I remember writing my first story and it just kind of got torn to shreds by my editor, which is fine. It was a learning moment, you know. But my sophomore year, I started as just a staff editor, and then I was the associate news desk editor. So I was in charge of breaking news. So I was in charge of pitching stories to all my writers. If there was breaking news on campus or around Madison, I was in charge of either going and covering it or finding someone to go cover it. And then I did a whole 180. And my senior year, I was the features desk editor. So I was in charge of longer form, more investigative stories. So I have kind of gotten a whole overview of journalism while I was at the Daily Cardinal, which was a great experience. I kind of got a little taste of everything, so it was great.
All right. And then you mentioned having the not just the journalism education, but the Spanish as well. Is that something you've
Mhm.
been putting to use?
Not as much as I would like to necessarily. Sometimes it's hard to find places to practice it, but I definitely try and use it when I can. I stay on top of my Duolingo, you know,
I
to get some
I just
practice where I can.
I just want to know if Sophia Minert has any reason to think that her job is in jeopardy
Oh,
for all of the Spanish language interviews that she does after Brewers games for FanDuel. And by the way, and by the way, she is, I mean,
she
she's
rocks.
won an Emmy Award.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
She's a workhorse and does those interviews. And so I can imagine that might be some practice for you if we can get you down to the Brewer dugout and talk to some of the players.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great.
You've been to your share of sporting events already, as you've shared your story in some of your first editions of our newsletter, talking about things that you've done with your dad and some of your travels around the state. What
Mhm.
are some of the favorite memories you've been sharing already?
You know, so I've only ever gone to 2 Packer games in my life, you know? My first one was last year or last season for my birthday. Me, my dad, and my brother went, which was super fun. And then me and my boyfriend actually went 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now for the whiteout game, and that was really cool. So we kind of just went on like a last minute, like, why not? Let's go. So we ended up going. That was super fun. I've been to a ton of Badger games in my time. I started going to those when I was really little, and that's when I was like, "Oh, I really want to go to school here," you know.
Hmm.
And Brewer games too. I've been to my fair share of those. Packer games are a little bit more slim, but
How much jumping have you officially done with the jump around? Could you count the number of times you've jumped?
I'm trying to think the amount. I don't know how many times I've jumped, but I've definitely got
It's a lot.
burned some calories there for
Have you
sure.
Yes.
have you actually
Yes.
jumped, or have you just like kind of bounced?
Yeah.
Is
Do you
more
just
Oh, I
bounce on the
jumped.
balls of
you
your feet?
Oh wow,
No, you
okay.
actually jump.
You
Okay.
gotta jump because I would always get upset when people are just like, "Oh, yeah," you know, I'm like, "That's not jumping, you're not jumping around, come on," you
That's
know?
like me when that's like me with the wave. The wave used to be this big
Yeah.
new thing, and now if you're with a wave, I kind of lift my hands up, like, hey.
Yeah,
Ellie would
that's
yell
fair.
at us for that. Exactly. We're
I would.
talking to Ellie Bourdo, the new newsletter editor, with us here at Up North News. And as we get into the things that you've been working on, I mean, you right away started with a special edition last week, all about fall in Wisconsin, and needless to say, as you know from our segments with Sharita Booker on Thursdays, there's no shortage of stuff that you can do. There's no reason to be homebound in Wisconsin.
Absolutely, yeah, there is plenty to do, all and our fall guide covers Oktoberfest all around the state, we've got fall festivals, we've got some, like, spooky, scary spots as Halloween kind of approaches, so we have no shortage of things for you to do. I love hearing responses from all the readers of, "Hey, this gave me something to do this weekend, like, I'm gonna go check out this fall festival," or, "I'm gonna go to this Oktoberfest and try this pumpkin beer," you know? So, there's definitely no shortage of things to do, and our, fall guide definitely shows that, so
Yeah, I mean, a big part of the premise of Up North News, folks go, well, you guys just cover a lot of political news. Well, we do because we think that is stuff that people need to know about. But by and large, we're just an outlet that celebrates Wisconsin and wants people to get in the car and get all around, get to some new event, some new festival, some new place that you haven't hiked before or something like that. I know it was a series of newsletter stories that got me thinking that I've got to go see more of these waterfalls around Wisconsin. And so last year I know we went to go see a couple of those. So as you have started looking at things that may get into the newsletter, have you already started your own little bucket list of things that, like, I haven't gone there yet and I want to get to that?
definitely. That's something that selfishly has been really nice for me to be able to look into all these things. And now I'm like, oh, I have something to do this weekend. You know, if I have no plans, I'm like, oh, I'm going to go check out this Oktoberfest or, oh, I'm going to go check out the ginormous pumpkin fest, you know,
Mhm.
those kinds of things. So it definitely has helped me find things to do throughout the coming weeks, you know?
Well, and I know that Selena Heller was at the ginormous Pumpkin Fest
Hmm.
in Altoona last weekend and would be more than happy to take you around and, have you see some of the sights over here in the western part of the state. And I was encouraged to note that as you've been making your drives, you have not just like you and Parker, you kids in your rock and roll music, you have shown a willingness to listen to some of the classic stuff, which is a nice way of saying old guy radio. But you've been to some concerts and started up a whole new playlist that kind of defies your generational boundary.
Yeah, a little bit. I guess you could say that. I grew up on that kind of music. My mom is super into that kind of music. My dad is too. My parents, their favorite band is AC/DC. Our dog is named after Angus Young. His name is Angus. So all that kind of stuff. I was definitely born on those, and raised on that type of music. So it just kind of is what I love, and going to those concerts was so fun. Yeah, it's a great time.
I am sitting here just blown away.
You're
I
so
grew up
happy,
with
Pat.
my well, yes, but again, my generation's parents, they were listening to Neil Diamond and Barbara Streisand and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And I didn't realize we've come to the generation now where they go, oh yeah, my mom and dad, they listen to AC/DC all the time. Was not expecting to hear that. So that is awesome.
Yeah.
And makes me feel super old at the same time. But
Yeah.
that's okay. Well, this is going to be a lot of fun, and I
Mhm.
hope we saw you go through the interview process and heard all about some of your ideas and your enthusiasm. So I hope you're looking forward to things so far. Robin Tigerton says, "Hi Ellie, you do an excellent job on the newsletter." He also writes, this weekend is Caroline Colorama. It's one of the, it also says one of the largest horse trail rides around. So yeah, we have no shortage of people that want to provide some, insight for giving you ideas for the newsletter.
Mhm.
Do you want to let people know how they can reach you?
Yeah, so you can reach me via email, ellie@couriernewsroom.com, or if you just hit reply to the newsletter, if you sign up on our website, if you just hit reply, I'll get that, I'll see it, I'll respond to you, which is super great. So yeah, it's great to hear responses. I've had so many people reply with, again, things to do in Wisconsin or things that I maybe missed or things that they want to hear more about. And I love hearing those things. So it's a step-by-step process. I'm still trying to kind of get into the swing of things. I'm still pretty new, but hopefully with time it'll get better and better and you'll see more of what you want to hear.
Oh yeah, it'll definitely click in. So
Mhm.
Ellie is ELLIE. That's Ellie at
Mhm.
couriernewsroom.com. Courier Newsroom being the parent company of Up North News. So this has been a lot of fun. I really have appreciated you stepping into this role and starting to put some things in there already. Not just the feature stories, but obviously we also drop in a little bit from the day's news
Mhm.
headlines. For example, we do have a story in today's edition about basically the new backdoor abortion ban that came from the Trump Republican mega bill, and it's the reason why Planned Parenthood is not performing abortion services currently in Wisconsin while that law is being challenged. So you're always going to get up to date on some of the big news stories in the area, but you're also going to get those little pieces like the story today about some special moments from the Brewers season to
Mhm.
kind of get you ready for the playoffs. So a
Yeah.
well-rounded publication you're putting together there.
Definitely, yeah, we try and do a little bit of both. I think it's important to have some of the hard news in there of, hey, this is what's going on around you, got to keep up to date, but also we want to keep things positive, we want to keep things light. What are some fun things going on throughout the state, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So we try and keep it a good mix. So,
Oh, yes, you do. All right. Ellie Bourdo, thank you. We'll talk to you next week.
yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Pat.
All right. Thank you. All right. So there you go. To learn more and to get signed up for what Ellie's putting together, you can stay up to date by heading to upnorthnewswi.com and click subscribe in the banner on top of the homepage. From the heart of America's Up North here, live from Lake Wissota. Thanks for making this the place to spend part of your mornings. I'm Pat Kreitlow. This is the Civic Media Radio Network.
You're listening to Civic Media. Stay up to date on the latest news and information for your local community and Wisconsin by signing up for our free email newsletter. Visit civicmedia.us/email to get started.
If you missed it yesterday, the Cubs beat the Padres in Game 1 of the National League Wild Card Series. If the Cubs win again this afternoon, they will be the Brewers' opponent in the National League Division Series starting Saturday in Milwaukee. If the San Diego Padres win this afternoon, it will force a third and decisive game tomorrow afternoon to see who shows up at American Family Field coming up this weekend. We'll keep you up to date here, of course. We've also got our Go for the Green and Gold text to win contest. Use that Civic Media app and send us the keyword cheer, CHEER, before 8 a.m. for your chance to win a daily prize and also be in the running for that grand prize of tickets to see Green Bay versus Minnesota. Great indoor seats in Green Bay. Well, now we can say next month because the game's going to be in November. So again, cheer before 8 a.m. There is a lot to respect about America's military, the men and women who serve in uniform and who make untold sacrifices, and some make the ultimate sacrifice. And their leaders are people with tremendous amounts of experience. They have earned our respect. They have earned our deference. And what they have not earned, what they do not deserve, is the thing that happened to them yesterday because of a talking head from Fox News who got appointed as Secretary of Defense, who gathered senior military officers from around the world, summoned them all into one room in Quantico, Virginia, near the nation's capital, to lecture them on how he, and then a lecture from President Donald Trump on how he expects the military to be ultimately loyal to them, including, if directed, going into the streets of American cities and causing violence against fellow Americans over some alleged crackdown on crime, when we all know that's not what this is. It is quite literally about the militarization of America, and it should concern you between now and the midterm elections next year, when American voters have a chance to say no to all of the nonsense they've seen of the past year. But you had a president who was telling people that, the streets of America's cities were basically a training ground for other work. And then you had Pete Hegseth talking about, grooming guidelines and being in shape, which is a little awkward when you consider the physique of the commander-in-chief, and to trash the idea that there are certain rules of engagement. Keep in mind that Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump have honored people who have committed war crimes. Again, the honor and respect we show to our military is not limitless. It has its boundaries. That includes certain standards of conduct, even in war, but not to people like Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, who have no honor and who do not have a scintilla of the service and education of much of America's senior military leadership. So the thing that I appreciated the most about all of those people summoned from all over the world at tremendous taxpayer expense, the thing I admire most is that they kept a straight face. I mean, it could have gone in all kinds of other directions. It could have become, say, a campaign rally. That Trump and Hegseth were trying. They were trying to bait the crowd with certain remarks and hoping, to show a military that would go to the mats for Trump and for Hegseth and for J.D. Vance and for the Republicans in Congress who have abdicated their responsibilities of oversight. But that didn't happen. The other thing that didn't happen was any senior military leaders essentially rising up in opposition. I know there were people that were saying, wow, this could be the makings of like some kind of a military coup if enough people, wanted it to happen. No, that's not what we want to happen either. And that Trump and Hegseth were just baiting somebody in that room so that they could make an example out of them and fire them on the spot to show how tough they are and that this is their military, not America's military. And nobody took the bait on that either. They all came, they all gathered in one place, which, by the way, in and of itself if you had a Congress with actual oversight, would have something to say about that. You gathered all of America's senior military and political leadership in one room, and you advertised it ahead of time. Now, I know it's not like we don't have missile defenses and things like that, but simply putting that many people in one area that you could put a bullseye on is amazingly reckless. And yet Trump and Hegseth did it anyway. And Donald Trump was rambling in a way that, again, if you were to watch it, I would not be surprised if you too were saying to your TV, where's the coverage of this? Joe Biden mispronounces one word and the entire press corps is demanding resignation. And what we're getting in now is so much worse in terms of its rambling, in terms of the lies that are inside of those words, in terms of the politicization of America's military that he is attempting. And yet we treat it as just another day. Oh, that's just what, Donald Trump does. Well, now he's done it. All the senior military leadership goes back. And frankly, not much is going to change. I mean, the president will again deploy troops into some cities. He'll do it for symbolic reasons more than accomplishing anything other than a pretend show of strength. The real concern will be, again, as we get closer to our midterm elections, and whether the president, who again lied yesterday about the 2020 elections, will make something up about the 2026 elections, because he tried a coup. He tried to overturn the will of the voters in 2020. There's nothing that indicates he will not try something funny again next year. And I believe our American military leaders stand at the ready to not be used for that kind of a tool. We'll be back after this. I'm Pat Kreitlow. You're up north. Welcome back, live from the lake here in Chippewa Falls. It is 7:35, which means that you have less than 25 minutes to text us the word cheer in the Go for the Green and Gold Text to Win contest. Use that Civic Media app, find the text button, and text the word cheer, CHEER, before 8 a.m. for your chance at a daily prize of $200 cash and a gold-plated chain, see green and gold. And also, every entry puts you in the running for that grand prize of tickets to see Green Bay versus Minnesota, a little football game with some great indoor seats in Green Bay for a game next month. Again, cheer, and then you'll have another chance to win starting at 9 a.m. for Matinee on Air. I mentioned Green Bay and Minnesota playing football as part of this. There's also going to be some Wisconsin Badger football to talk about for later this week. The Badgers were off last weekend. This weekend, they are taking on Michigan. Coverage begins at 9 a.m. on Civic Media stations in Richland Center, Amory, Wisconsin Rapids, and Ripon. Also wanted to let you know through Civic Media, because we talked to Ellie Bourdo just a bit ago about Up North News and its newsletters and your updates there. But Civic Media also has ways that you can get local news with a statewide reach. All you got to do is go to civicmedia.us and then click on one of the many stations that are there, your local station preferably. And up near the top of each station's homepage, you'll see a daily news roundup, and you can listen to it right there. Folks from the Civic Media News team record those daily. You can also sign up for email versions of their daily news updates while you're there. Again, that's at civicmedia.us to go learn more. All right, time for a little homeroom action here where we talk about public education on Wednesday mornings around this time and some of the opportunities, some of the threats that are out there as well. You'll recall that last week we visited with State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Jill Underley. And one of the things that we touched on briefly was the notion of all of these federal budget cuts coming from the Trump administration for the crazy idea that anything associated with what is known as DEI must be bad and has to be cut. Now, never mind that from a race-based standpoint, that's racist on its face. And of course, they've got the shall we say, the cojones to claim that diversity, equity, and inclusion is itself racist because, white people are such victims. But it's the way that they have stretched the definition of DEI that is, I mean, it would be funny if it weren't so harmful. And the one we talked about last week that is still a concern out there deals with the 100 or so Wisconsin families that could soon be losing access to services that aid deaf-blind students. And that's because of cuts by the U.S. Department of Education. So the DPI, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, has said there will not be federal grant funding available for the Wisconsin Deaf-Blind Technical Assistance Project. The current Trump administration says that they're reevaluating everything, and that according to an administration spokesperson, grants like these to deaf-blind students, okay, many of these grants, according to a statement, use overt race preferences or perpetuate divisive concepts and stereotypes which no student should be exposed to. The non-continued grant funds are not being cut. They are being reinvested immediately into high-quality programs that better serve special needs students. Well, never mind the last part of that, which is just blatantly wrong and false. But this whole notion of that money that goes to deaf-blind education, according to this statement, perpetuates divisive concepts and stereotypes. Being deaf and or blind is not a stereotype. It's not a divisive concept. All right. It's a need that helps people learn and get access to assistive technology and transition services. There's nothing luxurious about this, about the programs that are provided through the Deaf-Blind Technical Assistance Program. And of course, the Department of Public Instruction is, trying to stay on top of the Trump administration and make the case that these grants should be restored. But at the moment, in the name of being anti-woke, these families are scrambling. Imagine if that's your child, and how do they get an education otherwise? Well, of course, that's only one example from Cleo Krejci in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel from yesterday. Citing concerns over diversity, equity, and inclusion, the U.S. Department of Education has eliminated about $8 million in grant funding earmarked for special education teacher programming in Wisconsin K-12 schools. So apparently, training special education teachers is divisive or somehow racist. The Department of Education reviewed all grants like this and said that, there were problematic words in some of these grant applications. For example, that special education coaches would be trained with an equity mindset. There apparently was also language in another grant application that said that that there will be a discussion of the impact of white supremacy and the history of whiteness on systems, and work to disrupt and dismantle its effects and facilitate action planning to build a more equitable system of education in its place. The Trump administration says that doing that is itself discriminatory, and the Trump administration has argued that the concept of systemic racism does not exist. Okay, let's go back on this. Again, the problem there, they saw that there was a mention there about white supremacy, the history of whiteness on systems. Just try and tell me that in the past, there weren't examples where two children needed special education services. One was white, one was not. And there were only enough resources to take care of one of the students. Which one do you think got it? And if you go, oh, it must have been the non-white kid, you're not paying attention. Because for generations in this country, it was overt racism that prevented everybody's tax dollars from going to places where they are needed most. When people say, well, I don't believe in systemic racism, I don't believe in institutional racism because you're calling me racist. Nobody's calling a person racist. But you look at education, you look at healthcare, you look at our judicial system, and you look at the difference in outcomes still to this day. It's not necessarily that there are overt racists in there, but there are things in the system that continue to work against people who are not white. And as you look into these systems and say, okay, how can we make things different? How can we make sure that that white child in need of special education and that black child in need of special education and that Hispanic child in need of special education all have access to good and well-trained teachers? That apparently looking into that and how to make things more fair to all three of those little angels is somehow divisive and racist. It's not. It's these cuts themselves that are. And I've never had a problem saying that. This is a guy who said he was going to get rid of, the illegal terrorists on the streets and instead is rounding up all kinds of hardworking people for the crime of wanting to come to this country and build a better life the way that many of our great-grandparents did. And rather than fix the system so that they're not undocumented, you choose to blow up fixing the system. You make a conscious choice to avoid fixing the system, and you make a conscious choice to just round up brown people. Don't be surprised when you get called out on that, because it is exactly what it looks like. You're not making America safer. You're not making America great again. You're making things worse. You're making things more expensive. You're exacerbating the labor shortage. And now you're not even helping students who are deaf and blind or in need of special education services because of your rage about taking out your frustrations on people who aren't white because you feel some sort of white victimness, which is just one of the oldest, most frustrating things out there in America today. My goodness, it just gets to me, the people who think that they are somehow at a disadvantage because of this day and age, when we actually try to treat people more fairly, whatever their background. But that's what we have. And that's why our schools right now are fighting so hard to get grants restored, that we're making things better. But apparently now, if you're deaf, blind, or want to be a special education teacher, too bad. You don't get that. There's a new candidate for Wisconsin State Supreme Court to tell you about. The announcement came out early this morning. I will quote from Mary Spacuzza's story in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel that says, State Appeals Court Judge Maria Lazar is getting into the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. She will be the conservative candidate in the race rather than Justice Rebecca Bradley, who announced recently that she is not going to seek re-election. So it's quite likely that Appeals Court Judge Maria Lazar will face Appeals Court Judge Chris Taylor, a former Democratic state lawmaker who is already in the race for state Supreme Court justice. So at the moment, if no other candidates get in, it will be a classic progressive versus conservative campaign, the way that most of the recent state Supreme Court races have been. And keep in mind, progressives have won 4 out of the last 5 state Supreme Court races. And progressives have won something like 15 out of the last 18 statewide elections, because Wisconsin is much more of a 50-50 state, or if anything, lean progressive, than it is a conservative state. It has large majorities of Republicans in the legislature and the Congress only because they rigged the maps more than a decade ago. But this appeals court judge, Maria Lazar, is running now. She is a former assistant state attorney general under Scott Walker, who defended the state in lawsuits against Act 10. In a statement, she said, "We need to draw a line in the sand and stop the destruction of our courts, especially our state Supreme Court." Those are her words. To stop the destruction of our courts, especially our state Supreme Court. It is quite clear that from her past record and her campaign donors that she, in winning a seat for the Court of Appeals, had support from all manner of conservative and Republican groups. including Wisconsin Right to Life and Pro-Life Wisconsin, which argue for total abortion bans with no exceptions for rape and incest frequently. This is a state Supreme Court that, when it was in conservative hands, was against women's reproductive health rights. It was for gerrymandering the maps. It was for power grabs that were done by Republican legislators against Tony Evers and Josh Call, the Attorney General. And most chilling of all, that there were a couple of conservative justices who wanted to go along with Donald Trump's efforts to potentially overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election in Wisconsin. Maria Lazar is of that same mold, will have big time right wing donors in her race for state Supreme Court against Chris Taylor. Again, that race is in April of next year. If one more candidate gets in, if there are 3 or more candidates, there will be a primary, a nonpartisan primary in February. But regardless, a general election for a state Supreme Court race come April. Coming up in our next hour, some big news about the 7th Congressional District and who wants to run for it next year. Civic Media Radio Network.
You're listening to Civic Media. Find the latest news, information, and archives of all your favorite shows on the Civic Media website, civicmedia.us.
All right, you got yourself about 6 minutes here to send us the word cheer using that Civic Media app. Text us the word cheer, CHEER, before 8 a.m. for your chance to win a daily prize and a grand prize in the Go for the Green and Gold Text to Win contest. And in fact, let's I know we do this every so often. We just want to give a shout out to some of the people that have been jumping in here. There's Meredith and Madison, Jeff in Caledonia just jumped in. Let's see. We've also got Chris in Eau Claire, Harry in Weston, and on it goes. I love seeing this growing list of people that want to be part of our Go for the Green and Gold Text to Win contest. So thank you again. Cheer. And then your chance to send in another word coming up after 9 a.m. with Jane and Greg. Let's bring in Jimmie Kaska now to talk to us a bit about some of the sports that he's covered as Civic Media Sports Director and the sports that he's watching, which in this case would be the Cubs and Padres, because the Brewers are going to play one or the other starting Saturday in the National League Division Series. Jimmie, I know between your football coaching, your radio work and everything, you probably weren't able to just actually sit down and watch one of 4 baseball games yesterday.
No, I wasn't, but the Cubs and Padres series is fascinating for somebody who has to organize broadcasts on our network, because it's going to determine pretty much which time slot the Brewers will play in. If it's the Cubs, you're going to be in much earlier game times than you would if you're the Padres, because they're a West Coast team. So that part of it's fascinating for me. As far as which opponent is preferable, I think the Cubs storylines write themselves. They just played the Padres a couple of weeks ago, so that's sort of fresh in your mind. There's a lot of excitement to be had when it comes to baseball postseason, and I think having the week off helps, because they were kind of at the end there. They were getting there. They got to the win record. They were getting there, but they certainly had a much higher peak in the season earlier. The finish wasn't terrible or anything by any means. It just wasn't up to those lofty standards set in the June, July, August. So I think for anybody in Wisconsin, they're looking forward to baseball postseason, and looking forward to, I think, seeing if the Brewers can get a series victory or 2 or 3.
Well, if any team can, it is this one. I mean, we've certainly seen their ability to come back in late games, their ability to have the big innings. I mean, no team comes close to the number of innings of 4 or more runs that the Brewers have had. So if we can just get them to unload those bats from time to time, I think that we'll be in great shape that way. And yeah, your point about the time zones is extremely well taken, because we may end up with, I believe it's 8 p.m. Central Time is when the late games are starting. I hope it's not 9 p.m. I'll double check that, but that would be brutal if that's what the schedule would be for, say, next Monday.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you almost want the Cubs just for the time zones,
Yeah, and the thing is, your point about the scoring is taken too, pretty well taken too, because 3 of the 4 games yesterday were very low scoring. 3-1, 3-1, 2-1, and then 10-5 in the night game. So having the ability to create some instant offense is going to help. But what you would expect to be series where you're going to see a lot more of the top pitching than you would during the regular season.
Oh, without a doubt. And for folks wondering, well, what do you mean 3-1, 2-1, 3? Yeah, here's some sports scores: 3-1, 2-1, 3-1. Let's tell you who the teams are. So the Cubs beat the Padres 3-1. Detroit beat Cleveland 2-1. Boston defeated the Yankees 3-1, and then the Dodgers beat up on Cincinnati. Final score there was 10-5. And all 4 of these games will head into game 2 this afternoon, same times for all of them. And again, if Chicago, Detroit, Boston, and the Dodgers all win today, any of them who win today will win the series. But if it's San Diego, Cleveland, the Yankees, or Cincinnati, then in those series, there will be a deciding third game on Thursday, which is, I guess, really what we should be cheering for at this point, Jimmy, is, San Diego today. And then who cares on Thursday? Because they'll have to do a third game and wear out their bullpens a little bit more.
That was a great Mike Clemens impersonation you just did. That's pretty great, Pat. You I'm gonna tell Mike to look out. That was pretty awesome. Yeah, I think you'd be rooting for somebody to, rooting for those teams to go through some more pitching before playing Saturday. The Brewers would play Saturday and then Monday, so we know the dates for the Brewers. We just don't know the times or opponents yet, but we do know the dates at least. We know the Brewers will be back to work on Saturday. It was kind of a neat visual they posted showing on social media yesterday. They're going through practice, and up on the big screen, what do you know? They've got the Cubs and Padres game going as they're going through practice yesterday.
Nice.
So I thought that was pretty cool.
We have one bold sports prediction on YouTube. Tony puts the Cleve in 3. We have one diehard Cleveland Guardians fan amongst the listenership, and Tony's always going to let you know. It's kind of like Bucks in 6, but for him, it's Cleveland in 3. So then we've got the Badger football team had the week off. They are back at it at Michigan. I don't know how to describe this, but a gauntlet, that they've got to run throughout the month of October here. But you can hear coverage starting at 9 a.m. Saturday on Civic Media stations in Richland Center, Amory, Rapids, and Ripon. And again, are we just looking for the Badgers to be competitive, that they're willing to show Coach Fickle how hard they can push, some of these highly ranked teams?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at this, you're thinking if they can steal a win or maybe even a couple out of this, to be pretty much exceeding expectations at that point. I know a lot of people are looking for coaching changes, but you think of the buyout situation and things like that. Just don't see a frugal operation like the Badgers deciding to eat an 8-figure deal with a head coach. So I think for better or worse, unless things go completely off the rails, this is what you get for now. And you just hope that they can come out here and steal one of these games against these top teams. Having Ohio State and Oregon and all these, this is a brutal stretch, as you said, a gauntlet for them.
It really is. But you know what else is brutal? Kids can be brutal. Tell them, you with a really nice radio voice, tell what happened to your football team when your voice accidentally cracked while talking to the team a few days ago.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So if that happens, and you hear me now and you're thinking, okay, how did that ever happen? Well, you do enough radio and it's dry enough and you're telling people enough, you're going through a drill and all of a sudden the voice cracks. Relentless. The entire practice of people mocking me.
Which is funny for people who themselves have been going through puberty and adolescence. Nobody in that group should be picking on people for your voice cracking, but hey,
oh man, teenage boys, man, it's just
they're the worst.
What it is.
They're the worst. Jimmie Kaska, always love the golden tones. Thank you so much for the visit. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
All right, coming up in our next hour, we'll be talking to Earl Ingram right after the news, and then a big announcement about the 7th Congressional District up north. Here, up north, details along the way on the Civic Media Radio Network.
The national news cycle never stops, but it can be hard to find news about your local community. Civic Media is dedicated to providing quality local and state news coverage across Wisconsin. With the Civic Media app, you can get notifications about local stories that matter to you and your community. Find the free Civic Media app in your phone's app store and choose notifications from the menu to tell us what kind of news you want to hear about.